So thanks so much, Katherine, for taking the time to speak with me and more importantly, with the rest of the SIG today. I'll just introduce you quickly. So Katherine is an associate professor based at the University of Duke in the US, and she's conducted lots of amazing research, particularly developing exercise programs for older veterans. But I'll let you talk a little bit more about your work. But I just thought this would be a really good opportunity for myself to get to speak to you, but also all the members of the SIG who would love to hear a little bit more about all your work, and also maybe some of your visions in the field, if that's okay.
Likewise, Grace. I'm really thrilled to be invited to participate, so thank you.
Thank you. It might be good just to start. Do you want to just give us a really brief overview of your work, Katherine, and maybe how you started working in this field?
Sure. So I completed my doctoral training out at the University of Illinois in exercise psychology with an emphasis on aging. So my training was in applying principles and theoretical models of exercise science in the context of aging and disease. But through that experience, I realized that I was really working with kind of the worried well in the community. These are older adults who are relatively high functioning, have few health comorbidities, relatively affluent. And so I decided in my postdoctoral training that I really wanted to focus on and get access to a more clinical population with a more significant health burden of comorbidities, and certainly at risk for physical inactivity and sedentary behavior as an opportunity for intervention. So that brought me to Durham and the Durham VA, where I came on as a postdoctoral scholar in geriatrics, and working solely with older veterans. And so when I started, I was helping with an exercise intervention targeting older veterans with pre-diabetes. And just in the context of speaking with our activity counselor, she shared that this cohort of veterans, which was starting to transition to the Vietnam era veterans, were just having so much more difficulty than she'd experienced with other cohorts when it came to physical activity counseling and engagement. And so we started talking about, kind of what that was, why it was, and it really seemed that this PTSD condition, the whole gestalt, was really making it hard for them to initiate and then maintain a physically active lifestyle. And so I was really lucky to be there when the lightning struck the ground at that point. And I really seized onto that as a at-risk population that I really, really wanted to help. And it has really been very fortunate to kind of take off from there. So I've now committed about 10 years of a relatively short career. I'm a mid-career investigator, but 10 years of that has focused solely on developing tailored and targeted exercise interventions for older veterans with PTSD.
Amazing. You've done some amazing work, Katherine. Do you want to just talk us through a bit about one of those programs that you have been running for older veterans? What does it involve? Who runs them? What background do they come from?
Yes, all the above. That's right. So in the VA system as a trainee, they have a really solid platform and pathway of support for investigators. So Grace, my first award or career development award, similar to a K, was to first characterize the problem, right? Like what is the contextual diagnosis of PTSD? Because I was becoming frustrated early on with how in the medical record it seemed like the PTSD diagnosis was what drove the whole path and model of care. So it's like when a clinical provider saw PTSD in the record, it was used as almost an excuse or scapegoat for the other list of cardiometabolic diseases that they also had. But I would hear over and over again providers saying, well, we can't do anything about the diabetes until we get the PTSD under control.
Yeah.
And that's just completely antithetical to a geriatric and a rehabilitation model or approach to care, right? So geriatrics, we're all about promoting independence and quality of life in the context of chronic disease, not once chronic disease is cured, but realizing that a lot of these folks, and I include PTSD in there as a chronic disease, are going to live with and age with PTSD symptoms for decades, and that's who I'm working with here. And so, characterizing the problem of PTSD beyond psychological symptoms and comorbidities. And then the next award was really doing the first trial of exercise interventions for older vets with PTSD, to just look at feasibility and acceptability. We had done qualitative work with older veterans with PTSD saying, I want to be offered health promotion programs. All I'm getting are smoking and drinking cessation programs. Bring something good that I can do to be an active agent in my own health. But as we all know in behavioral science, if you build it, will they come is not a necessary equation. It's not a given. And so the second project was to look at accessibility and feasibility of a 12-week supervised intervention for these older veterans with PTSD, and they just blew our expectations away, Grace. Again, in my prior work with older adults, we're used to seeing adherence rates of anywhere between 40 and 60%. These older veterans were maintaining at about 85% of the sessions that we offer. We had very low attrition, which again is counter to what we see with a lot of these folks in evidence-based psychotherapies. Which gave us the confidence and the preliminary data we needed to say this is worth moving forward, and we might have a really strong intervention to build upon. So we just got that next stage grant. So a large scale with older veterans with PTSD, extended the duration of the intervention to 6 months. But otherwise, the secret sauce, the recipe is the same, a multi-component exercise program, really emphasizing and targeting functional fitness, right? So improving their ability to be mobile, lower body strength for everyday activities, really matching them on to the function-related goals that they shared with us were their priorities. And so I've been fortunate to work with a great staff that includes exercise physiologists, clinical psychologists, as well as epidemiologists, and kind of medicine and allied health trainees to develop and actually deliver this intervention. Now, COVID, of course, threw a whole bunch of curveballs at everyone, and our group was not spared that. So we've been doing some field work around remote delivery. But again, we really have learned from that initial work that the in-person piece is important. So we're trying to move forward with that in the current grant. And then we'll turn our attentions to learning from other scholars about developing group and social cohesion that mimics in-person experiences in remote platforms like this.
Yeah, great. You've done such a good job at, breaking down those traditional mental and physical health silos, and it's really exciting that you're doing this work. But that kind of leads me into my next question, that we're all kind of doing this work in isolation, and we've seen a lot of those same things here in Australia with, people, particularly PTSD, want to engage in these exercise programs, but often just don't have the resources or the right support to do it. So within this special interest group, there's lots of people doing amazing work, but mostly on their own. How do you think we could kind of harness all this excitement and the interest and the skills of different members of the group, or kind of what role do you see for a type of group like this SIG?
Yeah, so I think, this is my bias being trained in this kind of team science and interdisciplinary approach to research questions. That's always been my experience. But the longer I'm out here in this investigational world, I realize that that's not the standard. And there are pros and cons to doing team science, but I'd say the strengths greatly outweigh the drawbacks. But I think there's a lot of potential, as you discussed in your opening comments, Grace, about bringing together complementary but distinct groups of providers and of researchers to more robustly explore questions and approaches, implementation methods of bringing health promotion, lifestyle intervention to older adults with or well, in my case, older adults, but any adult with traumatic stress experiences or symptoms. So, a lot of the work, again, with PTSD started around characterizing the psychological symptoms. And then we saw a burgeon of literature looking at the biometabolic profile of PTSD in terms of high rates of inflammation. We're now starting to look at cognitive and genetic precursors or signatures of the PTSD condition. And instead of running separate trials to look at separate outcomes, it would be so much more efficient and robust if we could have teams of scientists and clinicians working together to identify what we bring to the table, which is an evidence-based intervention in terms of exercise for health promotion, both psychological and physical well-being. And in the context of those models and interventions, exploring other outcomes and pathways that are of interest, including the cardiometabolic pathway, among others. I just think that would be an exciting path to see us move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be the dream.
Investigators huddle here, and our behavioral group huddles here, and the two shall meet. But I know there are challenges with that work, but I think that's inherently where we'll be going.
Yeah, that would be great. I've just got two final questions for you, Katherine. We have a lot of members within this group who are early career researchers. I just want to know if you had any advice for us.
Oh, yes. I feel like that long ago that I was in that echelon. But, less than a year ago, I actually took on a new role here at Duke, and that was being taking over as program director for our Aging Center postdoctoral fellowship. So I say that in that it's given me the space to really be thoughtful and to learn from emerging scholars who are getting into the field of research, clinical research, of what their priorities are and interests. And I think there's a lot of space for emerging scholars in the field of lifestyle interventions, health promotion, and mental health. And I think, I'm sure folks have heard this a lot, but identifying strong, aligned mentors early in your career path is incredibly important, and can open up doors that you didn't even know you wanted to go through. And so what I have found in terms of good mentors or mentorship teams is that they really encourage, and I would echo these sentiments to any early career investigators, to be open to opportunities, not necessarily have a singular focus on one path or one department or one institution. I joined the VA, but it's not because I was inherently patriotic. I was not driven by this mission to serve necessarily, but I was really interested in the population and the health profile of that population. And then the PTSD piece fell into my lap, and it all just has taken off there. So being open to ride a wave that's exciting to you, I think, is important. I also think that there's a lot of untapped potential, and there are a lot of exciting young scholars doing work in the area of systemic racism and systemic discrimination as contributors or exacerbators of PTSD and stress and traumatic experiences. And I think, again, teaming up with interdisciplinary teams that include social scientists to help us better understand the etiology of these issues and how we can better or even assess at all some of these contributors would really increase the robustness and relevance of our work, to be sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really
For postdoc, please let me know in aging. I'm happy to talk with anyone.
Don't be silly. You're one of those amazing mentors that a lot of us look up to. I think it's a really exciting opportunity, particularly for the field, but also early career researchers, which is why I wanted to talk to you. So thanks so much, Katherine. I won't keep you for any longer. Did you have any other final comments or anything though that you did want to add?
No, I would say, just now that you've got me on the mentorship train, Grace, is that, it's good to have diversity in a mentorship team as well. So I've seen, really effective early scholars benefiting from not only disciplinary mentors, right? So who can provide the expertise and the guidance around exercise and PTSD, for example, but having someone who might be a little bit more insulated from your discipline, but who can provide career development insights and be a sounding board as a neutral party is also super important, particularly in the early stages of career. So just note that. And again, I'm just excited to be involved and thrilled to share my experiences with folks.
Yeah, really good point. How would you suggest, Katherine, I don't know if you have any ideas about how we go about, introducing ourselves to these people, or, do you think it's okay to just contact them via email? How do we kind of approach these mentors?
It is, particularly now in the last year and a half, the idea of a cold call or a cold email, I don't even think that exists in our lexicon anymore. I think it's always good to start a communication with an intention or a game plan, or it's not super helpful to just reach out and say, I really admire your work, and then leave it at that. But what are you hoping to gain? What would be the next step? Contacting someone and saying, I've got a year left on my training. I'd be interested in any training or career opportunities in your lab or your trainees' labs, your alumni, to start establishing that network would be really good. And then social media, gosh, it has helped senior and early stage investigators connect and promote their science. And so I would start looking for these folks on social media and connecting, and not just sticking to LinkedIn and email, for example.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thanks, Katherine. So I might leave it there. Thanks so much for sharing all of that. It's really insightful. And I'm sure a lot of people listening who are in the SIG would really appreciate some of the information you've shared today. So if anyone else is interested, though, there will be a spotlight within our next quarterly newsletter. And we have interviewed Katherine again on there. So if you're interested, there's some more information about her work on there. So thanks.
Wonderful. So great to speak with you, Grace. Thank you so much.
You too. Thanks so much, Katherine.